Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are doing a complete spoiler-filled discussion of Thumbs. It's part of our Summer of Social Media, like a totally different spin on social media in this one.
Yeah.
But I think great for compare and contrast to, the previous series we've covered. But the first thing I have to say is, where do you think this book ranks in terms of reading difficulty with all of the books we've done so far? I put it number 2 right behind The Seeds.
You're talking like
in terms
overall.
Of well, in terms of like, right. Yes, every book we've covered on the podcast in 3+ years. How accessible is this book?
I don't know if I have a rank for it, but given what you just said, I would agree that it's on the higher comprehension side. It's on the far right end of the bell curve, without question. The way the book is structured, the way it's presented, this is definitely a book. You just invoked The Seeds, and I hadn't thought of it that way, but now that you said it, that's honestly all I can think about. Is that similar to The Seeds? This isn't a book that holds your hand throughout the story.
Which I would say is always true of Sean Lewis, and not always true of Ann Nocenti.
Ann
Nocenti has that range. Sean Lewis is always kind of dense and opaque, and I think he's a very good writer. I think it's an intentional choice of you're going to reach for this a bit.
Clearly, and I think a lot of it is too, like, Nocenti has so much experience with her time, mainly at Marvel, which is just when you're working for hire stuff at one of the big two, it's a different story structure, just the way it is, and someone like Sean Lewis, who has done a little bit of that work we covered last week, a little bit of work specifically at DC, but most of the stuff that he's done is creator-owned work. A lot of stuff he's done with Hayden Sherman, they've worked together there. But I think the way he approaches story is very much like, it's not unusual for a story like this to just drop you in media res. Like, this book starts, in a panic. You don't know what's going on. This main character Charlie, who, when the story starts, you assume it's his narration, right? But you don't know if he's the main character. You have you don't know what's happening, and your presumption as a reader, if you've consumed a lot of story, is, okay, fine, I've seen this show before, right? We start in the middle, or we start at the end, and we get this big cacophony of noise, and then boom, we're going to jump back and we're going to fill the gaps in to lead up to this moment. And you don't quite get that here. They don't quite do that with this story. They fill in the backstory, and you do eventually get that, but that isn't the point of what the story they're telling. So filling in, everything leading up to the moment the book starts isn't actually important. They're going back. They tell you you see the exact encounter, I guess, in which Charlie gets injured. But there's so much more to reveal about the world, and it jumps back and forth. And they are expecting the reader to catch up and to be engaged with it. And that isn't something that, I guess that it is something that's normally expected for readers to just assume that, like, or I guess to assume they're going to stick with your book and stick with the story.
Right. I mean, it's one thing when you're like, like James Tynion or someone who, it's just like, he could come out with the most esoteric first issue ever, and the Tynion fans are going to pick up issue 2 no matter what.
That is true. So, someone with an established track record, Tynion, who has done a bunch of stuff, like Brubaker and Phillips, can do whatever they want in their books, and it doesn't matter because people are going to buy them. And like, people just know I'm going to read this, and even if I'm lost 2/3 of the way through, I feel confident that by the end, I'm going to know what's going on, because there's a level of trust there. I don't know where Sean. I mean, his name doesn't. No offense to him, but his name doesn't rank as a writer with kind of in terms of popularity and like saturation, brand awareness.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think he would probably agree with that, but he has enough that he has free range from Image. Multiple things there. So I think the editorial team knows, like, he's got a solid base, and he's one of those guys where, like, if he gets discovered at the right time by the right group of people, everything he's ever written will appeal to. Like, if you like one of his books, you're probably going to like all of them.
Yeah, and I think probably worth mentioning, he probably has a little more of that juice now as we record in 2025. He might not have had a lot of that juice. This book came, this book, we should go ahead and say Thumbs is 5 issues, came out between June and October 2019. So once again, as we look back at on our social media timeline here, the Unfollowed, the book we just finished, that last issue came out in April 2017. So we've jumped ahead just over 2 years before Thumbs #1 comes out. And I think in the last 5-6 years, Sean Lewis has done a lot more stuff where he has more awareness now. Like, I was aware of books he has put out in the last couple of years, and I wasn't really aware of this book. Before you had mentioned it, and I was like, oh, right. I think one of the first things I knew him from was probably Above Snakes, which was only a couple years ago.
Is that the same exact team?
It is. So, if you look at what he's done with Hayden Sherman, the first book they did together was The Few. Thumbs is a second book they did together, and then Above Snakes, as of now, is like the third book they've done. They're not like a trilogy, but they're just books that the two of them have worked on together. That was probably the first book where I read where I knew, oh, this is Sean Films. And even at that point, I didn't know Hayden Sherman yet. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what they were up to. Now, I think, as I mentioned last week, they're one of just like the biggest artists out there, mainly due to their work on Absolute Wonder Woman at DC, which is just incredible. On top of the fact that they're also doing, that book with Kelly Thompson, they're also doing this Batman Dark Patterns book with Dan Waters, which is like this, like actual Batman detective story, like a year 2 to like straight up detective Batman stuff. So like 2 books at DC at the same time, one that gets all the praise, deservedly so, and then Dark Patterns is like a under the radar book, but it's still coming out every month too. So, to see a book like this that was on the earlier part of their career.
Well, especially if did you read the note from Sean Lewis at the beginning of the trade?
Yeah.
It says, on a side note, Hayden's working this here, so I'm going to update pronouns in real time because the publication.
Sure.
Hayden's work in this series is beyond phenomenal. They're starting to become that generational guy. It's a real pleasure to work with them, and I love the book. And I can honestly, it goes places you wouldn't expect and dares to be sincere. Mm-hmm. And honestly, some of that commentary sounds like you're talking about a writer, and I think that shows the power of the partnership.
Yeah.
Because it's like that like saying, I love the book, and I can honestly say it goes places you wouldn't expect. You wrote it. So it's like, that's how powerful the creative bond is here, is that they're literally pushing each other to be more creative, more expressive. And I think, like the way you said it, less handholdy. And the other comp for that, by the way, is I don't know if you've read any Mike Carey's fiction, like not comics, but
no, we talked about that when we did The Unwritten.
His big thing is he loves doing huge world building and then tells a little tiny story. It's like a almost slice of life, almost human interest, very small cast, even though it's this elaborate world that it exists in. And I think that's what Thumbs is. It's like, this is essentially 3 characters who matter. And it's like a whole commentary on society and, fascism and Luddites and technology and social media and gaming and culture and cyberbullying and all of these things. And there's like 3 people that matter.
I had a note later on about the story structure, the story presentation, about exactly that. How, as I was reading it the first time, as I'm working my way through the story, I kept feeling like, God, I kind of wish I knew more about the overall world. Then by the end of the story, I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter, because like I got the beats, and that wasn't they weren't telling the story about the world.
Right, and it's not about the world, although it is about how the world came to be.
Exactly. Yeah, but it is an extension.
But you don't know like what the constitution and governmental structure of the new world are. It's like, this isn't Tolkien. It doesn't matter.
And I think they did enough to show that the roots of the world of Thumbs is our world.
Yes.
the roots, the basis. And so we, as we talk about, I think the reason we can include this in our look at social media here is because that is the root, right?
Right. Oh, I mean,
This
the
world
first sentence
starts
on the back of the trade.
Yeah,
In a not so far off future, morally bankrupt billionaires. What? Never heard of those.
Never heard
build
of that
armies. Build armies on the backs of the impoverished, tech-obsessed youth. Well, it's like, okay, now that's 2019. This is still this is a much darker projection. I think post 2016 election, where that was where social media can impact real things in a really bad way.
It does feel like this is unlike the previous two books we talked about, which came out during that time, but were clearly the ideas originated and work on that started prior to that. This book clearly feels like a reaction to that, even though we haven't yet gotten to an even larger tipping point the following year in 2020. There was still a major tipping point in 2016. And I agree, this is a much bleaker look at the consequence of social media. But interestingly enough, I don't think it has a bleak look on technology itself. It's something that you already talked about. You already talked about the letter from Sean Lewis at the beginning, kind of his acknowledgments. The first thing in bold says, I don't hate technology. And I think the book goes out of its way to be, if anything, to be ambivalent towards technology and to make it clear that on one side of this fight is the Albert Camus character, or at least initially, right, who is using tech to fight back against the larger fascistic government. And this larger fascistic government are Luddites saying technology is bad. We don't want any of it,
Well, that was interesting. I was wondering.
It's clearly like the dichotomist there, where like we're using the tech for good, all the tech is bad, and it seems like the message of the story is just no, tech is just tech, And yes, there are bad things about it, but there are good things about it. But ultimately, it comes down to the people, and that's what the story. I think this story has a specific message it's trying to get across. I think it's that, and that is that. Social media isn't inherently bad. Technology isn't inherently bad. It's the idea that it's the people behind it and the use behind it. So maybe stop blaming Twitter for things and blaming the people who are on Twitter, that sort of thing.
Right. Although now you can blame the person who owns Twitter and pushes their content and pays bots and yada, yada.
Which is the same thing. Social media isn't bad. The ability to use... Right. The ability that social media gives us and the access that it can give us, that is not inherently bad. I think that's what they're trying to say.
Right. And you gave us a key word that I had written down. I had a lot of notes about it. The term Luddite, I think, if it does not appear in the text, it's like all over the subtext of the book. I don't
think it's stated.
Okay, no one says Luddite. Okay.
I don't think they do, but then that's what the government
the power,
is. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Literally just called the power. That's almost feels like a placeholder name in the pitch.
It really
but it was
does,
but then it was like, it doesn't matter. Just call it the power.
Exactly.
It is the power, like the Ohio State University. But they are, I would say, the way people use the word Luddite in modern parlance, they are actual Luddites. Like they smash all the machines, like get them out of here. Interestingly, the term originates from someone who was he was like worker in a textile factory during the Industrial Revolution, and they were replacing jobs and uprooting the economy with technology, and they called him a Luddite, thinking he was anti-technology. He was actually pro-labor, and was like against not all technology, not even necessarily this machine, was just against taking everyone in the town's jobs away because you bought 5 of these sewing machines. And that's actually very apt for what's happening, with AI in the next 10 years here.
Very apt.
Like soon the elites will call the labor class, the worker class, which is like middle class, white collar, college degree workers. They'll start calling us Luddites if we resist AI and things like that. So it's very interesting that even the word Luddite is like a political smear campaign.
100%.
In the way that it's modern.
100%. Yeah, because you're right. There's a difference between being anti-technology
and anti-application of technology.
Yeah. And there's also like the idea of just eschewing technology, like opting out of it versus being actively against it versus being against how it's being used. Like, so there are almost three different ways you can use the idea of Luddite outside of, like what you just gave, kind of the original definition of it. And here obviously we have the power is actively working against it, of course, except for their own personal use, right? The two founders have some sort of AI program that allows them to revisit their children that they lost, right? They have access to it, but no one else can. It's that sort of thing. There's that inherent contradiction in their existence.
Yeah, which can we talk about the other like obvious elephant in the room? This one actually is literally named Albert Camus,
Yeah.
famous philosopher. Just a one-for-one name drop. It's not an anagram or anything.
Yeah.
It's just like, here's the guy who is known for absurdism, but I think most accessible book was fiction called The Stranger, which is a novel about alienation and social expectation, and it fits right in here. I'm not sure. Hold on, now I'm getting my wires crossed. Camus was the one who was leading the youth in the tech revolution, not the one who shut down the factory, right?
In our story here?
In our story here.
Yes, yeah. He was the one that initially he was the one that was
he was
giving
the father
away,
to all the moms.
Yes, he was the one giving his technology away for free, as a way to train kids against them, and then got coerced into working for the power, as he admits later. But yeah, in terms of the world building, he's the one that sent the mom program out to everybody. All the kids who had the visors, playing the games, doing all that stuff. That was all his doing initially.
Yeah. So very interesting choice there. Mm-hmm. Probably a lot that could be said about that, but ultimately they kind of set it all for you by saying, like, if you want to know more about this character, go look up actual Albert Camus.
Yeah, just go and Google that.
Yeah, just see what you want to find, which I actually think is pretty great instead of reinventing the wheel. And it's a lot like, I actually think that character is more reminiscent of the real Albert Camus than all of the like faux philosophy references on like a show Lost, where there's a character named John Locke who his views had nothing to do with John Locke. In fact, philosopher John Locke would have found show John Locke abhorrent. And I think there were 20 some characters named after philosophers.
Yeah, but I think that was intentional, not in terms of matching character with philosophy, simply of they wanted to sprinkle that stuff in because they thought it was fun. So like I
right. I would think it was a lot more fun if it was like you were representing in a certain way different philosophers on the island.
I guess, but at that point, if you're talking about 20 some odd characters, it starts becoming a hat on a hat. I think it works fine here in a limited series with a character that is effectively a background character, even when he shows up later in like actual character form. Like he's still very much kind of a background player. He gets like one big monologue at the end.
If we never met him, it wouldn't matter. If he didn't have a name, because the only names you need are Charlie Thumbs, Nia, and his sister
Tabby.
Yeah.
No, there was I can go back to when I remember going with my first read. There was a part of me that I thought, oh, that's going to be great. Like this Albert Camus character, he's just going to be a person on a TV screen that the kids watch growing up. You know. Yeah, so meaning he was just going to be an idea, and then he shows up. It's like, okay, well, I see. Then he's showed up and he's quote unquote working for the enemy, and you're like, okay, well, I see what's going to go. There's going to be a turn at some point, and there was. It wasn't big dramatic turn, but I would have been totally fine if he had just remained an idea for, we'll call them the kids, right? For Charlie and Nia and all them. Obviously there's a time jump there, but if he just remained this idea to them versus a flesh and bone character that we saw, I think the story still works because by the end he's disassociated from what he started out anyway.
He's actually better as like the faceless symbol of something,
definitely,
than an actual character.
Yeah,
because actual characters are often more disappointing. I'm trying to find. So I think the greatness of the writing really shines through different times. And by the way, the lettering, I thought it was good work on the lettering, but I did find certain things hard to follow. Even though there's attention to detail of like shapes of the boxes, sometimes there's black text, sometimes there's gray text. Obviously, the pink boxes.
Yeah, there's red as well, red or pink. Yeah, whatever it is. Mhm.
Yeah, well, all the color palette stuff in this book, like very narrow scope of colors. It's almost monochromatic, but it never quite is.
Yeah, it's grayscale with the red pop.
The red pop is always
essentially.
technology.
Yeah.
But like sometimes the grays are kind of greenish, whatever. But anyway, a few great quotes here. The first one I'm going in chronological order. This is probably issue 3. It says, when people commandeered technology and became roving packs. He's reflecting on the decline of society, and what the power was reacting to was they were like, it became too easy for people to form mobs with the internet, which you have to admit is a fair point. Even though
100%, yeah.
Those are the authoritarians talking, right?
Yeah.
They're like, well, because of now, that's the slippery part. It's like, if X is Y, then Z. And it's like, well, X is true, but Y does not follow from X. We have to shut down the power grid, turn off all internet, take all of it away. That's not a logical conclusion.
I think that's a great example of how they structure the story, in that, I mean, when you get the villain origin story of the two leaders of the power, right? They're two parents that lost children basically through extreme cyberbullying, which is a terrible thing and a real thing that has happened and continues to happen. That is an objectively bad and terrible result of the world that we live in now.
Right. So it's, what are you willing to trade?
Yeah. So they don't minimize that kind of despair and anguish and grief, really. Now, yeah. So then the two of them take that to the point of, well, we got to get rid of all technology. That's a bad thing. But their observations about technology in what I'll just call it our world, because that's the world they're coming from. Their observations about technology and the way that we use it and the way that we're addicted to it, they're spot on. There's nothing wrong about that. That's absolutely correct. So there's a level of empathy, I guess, in that case. But I think what they also do a good job of is that our quote unquote good guys, our good guys are basically a bunch of child soldiers.
They're a bunch of Call of Duty players.
Yeah. Who, and I love that it was Charlie who flips it on Nia as like, look at, like, you're doing the same thing. Like, you're indoctrinating kids and training them the same way that the power is doing it. Like, how are you any better? The only way that you can justify you being better is because you think you're on the right side. But all the actions that both sides are doing, like, you guys there's a mirror in terms of how they're weaponizing children. It's just the way they go about it is one is through technology and one is without it, right? And the book isn't moralizing in that way. It's basically saying, like, doesn't matter what sides you're on here, you can be wrong about it because it's the people that we're focused on here. It's not about it isn't about the tech itself. It's the actions of the people. And I appreciated that about the book, that it wasn't like the kids were 100%, our good guys, right? Quote unquote good guys. Charlie and Nia, they are not 100% right. And our quote unquote villains, the power, they're not 100% wrong. They're coming from a place of real and actual relatability because of the world that we know, of our current state, even current in 2019, our current relationship at that time to social media and technology. Like, all that's real.
All of that's real, but there's like one very clear clue in here, which is also in the real world. Anytime your side is like, oh my gosh, they've been brainwashed, we need to do our own brainwashing program. It's like, yep. You missed it. Look behind you. It's like the line is back there, exactly.
It.
But the problem is they just keep mirroring each other.
Exactly. Yeah, both sides have done that, and I think they did a good job showing that like both sides have taken this too far. But the origins for both of them, in terms of what they wanted to do and what they were quote unquote fighting for, or kind of the world they wanted to live in, like it's kind of a your road to hell, good intentions, things like that, right? It's just that you're absolutely right. When you get to the point of making that declaration for the other side, at that point it's just too late. And both sides of this conflict, as it were, in the book are way past that line by the time we get to into our story.
Yeah, well, taking it too far and always using what the other side does as an excuse, it reminded me of, you're gonna be really happy with this reference. There's a line in Andor season 2, granted at the very beginning, where
Yes, sir.
like they're planning to exploit this planet. And they're basically like, what we need is an uprising, because we just need one person on the other side to take it too far, so that when we come in all heavy-handed, we can point to the one bad actor who went too far.
Yeah, yeah.
And
it's a false flag operation. Yeah.
Right. And you do that for 10 years straight and you have thumbs.
Yeah.
Right? It's like everyone just reacts to the worst example on the other side.
Yep.
And it's the excuse to just keep spiraling downward.
Yeah, yeah. It is.
This is like, I mean, like, well, here's the best real world example that I heard. This one made me roll my eyes, because I heard some, like, there's always the classic Dems in disarray tagline. But if this doesn't summarize it better than anyone else, there's like a group of establishment Democrats who have just gotten their butts kicked repeatedly lately. They're putting together their own Project 2029. And it's like, guys, like, you just, like, if you think my problem with Project 2025 was merely the contents, which is 90% of my objection, but the fact that they had like a think tank working on a malicious plan to take over everything, and it just sounds like something an evil empire would do, and for you to be like, we need our own Joe Rogan, we need our own Project 2020. It's like, no, stop doing this. This is like, and it's just amazing, because I'm reading this book now in 2025. I read it in 2019 when it came out, and I'm making totally different connections 6 years later.
Sure. I can see that.
I first read it.
Yeah. I mean, I only read this for the first time when you first suggested we thought about this. So it would have been a handful of months ago. This was not a book that was on my radar when it first came out in 2019. So yeah, when
I read it in 2019, I liked it, but I was like, who is he writing to? I'm like, I don't think this is where people are right now.
Yeah.
So he was just a little ahead of his time.
We got got there, because
if you read dark enough projections, we'll catch up eventually.
Because for me, reading it the first time a handful of months ago, I mean, so much of it was resonant, and this is one where, unlike our previous two books, Hacktivist and Unfollow, like, it is harder for me to put myself back into that time frame of when it came out, because I didn't read it I didn't experience it the first time when it came out. Although let this sink in. If you collected it in single issue in 2019 and read it, that's one experience. Yeah. When the trade drops during the pandemic, it would have been,
kids are getting exponentially more screen time at home, because every school shifted to home. And like Jonathan Haidt, has written that book, The Anxious Generation, about the incalculable damage of like screen time and social media and things like that to youth, and how the pandemic really exposed all of that. It's like, oh boy, like Sean Lewis was maybe only 9 months ahead of the curve on like, if something were to just massively increase our children's time in front of screens and on social media, that would be really bad, and this is how it would go. And like, as the trade is coming out,
just like, no, that's a great point. Yikes. That's a great point. Yeah, it almost immediately changes the reference points and the perspective of the reader if you came to this in trade.
If you covered up the copyright dates, I don't think anyone would think this was written before the pandemic. If you just handed these issues to someone, They would think this is reactionary stuff now.
That's what I was going to say. Reactionary, that was the word. It was reactionary to that versus reactionary to a different, kind of tipping point in social media, as we just said earlier in the episode, most likely in 2016, and seeing what that negative, starting to see the seeds of that negative impact, stuff that was too early to really be captured in Unfollow and in Hacktivist, but is now kind of fully exposed in society by the time thumbs come out in the middle of 2019. It's out there, and at that point, it's like we've already reached we've crossed that Rubicon of like we've all accepted now that it's not that great for us, but it's too late,
right?
And it Thumbs is riffing off of that idea of we've gone too far, and this is where it could lead to. And then you're right. Less than a year later, we know time just sped up by having everyone be locked indoors, and more of these ideas became more relevant and more prescient. We got there a lot sooner than maybe you might have expected us to get there. Even though that seemed like the inevitable path, we were always headed that way. Just
right.
Lockdowns in 2020
without the
sped it up.
acceleration.
Yeah, that was
there
gasoline.
are people that are like trying to warn you about it.
Yeah,
but they are not heard until something radical happens, which is just a shame. But
that's how it goes, though.
Every poet and writer will talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, and no politician will ever do lead actually ahead of the curve on things that are always reactionary. Mm-hmm. Which there's a line about that in here about our reactionary nature, about how we've actually. I had a little bit of semantic parsing of that. Hold on. There's something about how we became our technology, reflexive, responsive, and responding as soon as a question is asked instead of acknowledging that we don't know what we're talking about, that we don't have an answer yet. And I was like, okay, actually, did we become our technology, or did we make technology in our image? But specifically the image of people who made technology, people who are move fast and break things. They're reflexive, they're reactive. Like, not all humans are like that. But there is a high correlation, I would imagine, of Silicon Valley people who are, hyperactive, reflexive, reactive, and they're the ones programming technology.
That's a fair question. Yeah, I don't think in that case it wouldn't be. We didn't make technology in our image. We made it. It would be more specific to be in their image, and then that gets disseminated out to society, and then society changes into that reflection. So it's almost like a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Like they didn't.
Right. Life imitates art, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think that is very much. It goes both ways. I think that is a fair assessment because you're right. I mean, the creation of technology isn't a democratic idea. It's very insular. It's those that have access and those that are given the opportunity to. And then, and as we see very much in Thumbs here, our the comic version of Albert Camus is he's saying like, I have his whole grandiose idea was like, I had the ability, like, why should this stuff cost for, technology should be free, it should be open to everybody, but he's still the one making it. He's still the one who's influencing it. He's the one that's designing this mom application, this mom program. And he clearly had some hidden agenda. Whether it's sinister or not depends on what side of the coin you're on. But his whole idea of like, everyone should have access to this. But he didn't make it to reflect society. He made it to train kids to think the way that he thinks about the world.
Right.
So even if that comes from a benevolent,
but it's the naivete of acting like you
totally
like you don't have your thumb on the scale, because you didn't mean to, which is like, well, that makes it a little easier to digest, but also, in the words of Ultron, you're unbearably naive.
Yeah, it's an explanation, but it's not an excuse. It doesn't alleviate him or anybody else of their actions. It can be an objective observation, but It's like, hey man, you still screwed up. It still wasn't the right thing to do,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Also, the very Men in Black quote. Well, only vaguely reminiscent of Men in Black. But he's talking about his dad. I love people. I hate groups.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what's Tommy Lee Jones said something like,
A person is
a person
smart,
is smart, people are
people are
dumb,
stupid. Yeah,
panicky.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. But
and
but
I think
there
that's
is
definitely the principle behind this book.
it goes back to what you said earlier when you quoted the line about how technology made it easier to form groups or form mobs,
Yes.
right? It became easier because mob mentality is a real thing. And before, the only way to do that was to be part of a literal mob. Like you
Yeah.
had to get
Actually, grab
together.
a pitchfork.
Yeah, like it was an IRL thing. The interconnectivity of the world, as the book astutely points out, it broke down those barriers, and so yeah, you can form a mob, and now a virtual mob can be just as dangerous. And again, that's an inciting incident for the power itself. Something happens to someone, whether it's their fault or not, but they get put online about it, and the internet swarms on it. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but that's what happens when something goes viral, right?
Right.
It was it whether it's your doing, or whether someone violates your privacy or trust. The mob doesn't care because once it's out there, and that mentality just takes over. Yeah, and that personifies the idea that when people group together, like oftentimes you just lose your sense of, I don't know, I'm going to say decency, but is that right? I mean, in a lot of ways, yeah.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah,
I'd like wide angle lens this for a moment with me because ultimately the goal here is not just to talk about this piece in isolation, but chronologically with the other books we've read. And I think, interestingly, Camus' villain origin story does not happen as quickly as I'm trying to think of the villain in Unfollow.
Larry Farrell.
Yeah, Larry Farrell. Larry Farrell goes dark very quickly from a relatively minor incident.
Yes.
And this one is much more traumatic, uprooting, wild, but it is a swing. I mean, I think the problem with Kimu here is that he just moves from one brand of authoritarian to another brand of
Sure.
This is, he's always inclined to authoritarianism, so he is, in a sense, the villain, even though he does not seem to start out that way. He starts out on your side, and your side can't have an authoritarian because it's my side.
Well, yeah, well, because
And we're fighting the authoritarians.
exactly, he's fighting in authoritarianism by essentially installing himself as a shadow authoritative, right?
Right.
Because he's the one sending these out. He's the one training these kids. He's the one that's gamifying this whole idea. And then when he gets taken down, he just becomes a servant of the other authoritarians.
Right.
So yeah, he quote unquote switches sides, but yeah, it's just a matter for him. I think just a matter of perspective. But it's almost like that base instinct doesn't change. That fundamental belief doesn't change. It just, in a matter of self-preservation, in a way, he switches sides.
Yeah. So let me ask a crazy hypothetical. If Hacktivist had gone to 100 issues and was still coming out in 2019, would it have devolved to this at some point? Because there was an admission basically in volume 2 of like, hey, these guys are still good, but wow, what a mess social media is.
There is a version of Hacktivist as an ongoing book where there is a legitimate fracture between our two leads. I think that would have been, given how society went and how it progressed in the years that followed Hacktivist Volume 2 coming out. I think there is, as opposed to like the facade of a break that fueled much of Volume 2 of that story.
Right.
Where publicly they were against each other, but they knew what they were doing. They had a larger plan that was just hidden. I think as social media continued to decline in the years following that book, I think they could have done something where one of them has a true downfall, right? They
Right.
start having true opposite opinions about the nature of this technology, the nature of social media, and there was an actual split, and and one of them becomes more like more disillusioned with the world, like a Larry Farrell or even like a Camo here, someone
Yeah, I mean, the other
who
thing
turns
is,
on, who turns, quote unquote, turns on society, if not technology itself.
that's interesting because I
Yeah,
was thinking the way it was going is that perhaps the U.S. government slash CIA, who is meddling with them, kind of became the Luddite extremists, which then justify our hacktivist guys going further and further because they're like, well, they're trying to shut down all technology, take it away from the people while still using drone strikes and all kinds of other things. Therefore, we're allowed to use drone strikes on government targets in the United States because we're the good guys, and we're fighting what they're doing.
I could see that as
But
well.
it
I could
could
see that as well. Yeah,
devolve very quickly, and as long as you get the bad example that you're looking for from the other side, you can
it
exclude
justifies any of
all
your
other
actions.
data.
Yeah, 100%. Well, again, as you mentioned earlier, that's what this book is. The fundamental, the fundamental truth behind both sides is finding that one big example and pointing to them, being like, "See, I'm right because of this," and that justifies any action, and that continues to justify all their actions, regardless of what anything else is going on.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
mean,
it's
everyone's
just
looking for
cherry
a
picking.
poster boy
Yes,
for the other side.
100%.
Instead of asserting or arguing your point, all you have to do is show how bad the other side is, and you're right by default. Which goes back to the
It's
book
Adrian.
and movie.
Sorry.
Thank You for Smoking.
Yes, that's a great movie. Sorry, I was flipping through here. His name is actually it is Adrian in Camo
Adrian
in the
Camus.
book.
Okay.
Yeah, but in the book here, yeah,
I think it was a Freudian thing where I just filled it in.
it might have been in my notes. Honestly, I think I just wrote his last name, but I'm flipping through here again. Like, all right, well, it still starts with an A, so that's probably yeah. You're right, Freudian on our point. But again, the illusion I think is meant to be intentional.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying thank you for smoking. Sorry, go back to that.
Oh
'Cause
no, thank you for smoking. He was just explaining to his son about how he's like, well, the easiest way to do what I do as a lobbyist is just never be wrong. And his son's like, how do you do that? And he's like, because I'm not proving any points. All I need to do is poke holes in someone else's argument, and whatever I'm arguing for must be right if the other person is wrong.
Yeah.
And wow, we learned the wrong lessons from that book.
Yeah. That's what passes for discourse now. Like at the highest level is the idea of
I don't even know what the highest level of discourse means anymore. I've watched the last few presidential debates, and I'm like, I thought that was supposed to be the highest level of discourse, and it sure hasn't been.
you're right. I'm not talking about highest level highest level doesn't modify discourse. Highest level means in terms of the people having the discourse. That's a good qualifier. Yeah. The discourse itself is not high level, but the discourse is about things on a high level. It's just not being done in a good way. Yeah, that is a fair point because you're right. It's all garbage. Because that's what we've devolved into, and it feels like we can never get back to a point where anything real is being discussed in any substantive way. But that's a pretty fatalistic way to look at the world. But that's kind of what I'm left with.
Yeah, well, 2025 has not left us a lot of alternatives.
It really hasn't. It's been tough. Not been great. So,
And I have not read Mindset yet, so like this is as far as I've seen it go, and I'm like, whew, I'm hoping that Mindset can recover. Kind of what I was talking about a couple episodes ago, where it's like, I want to see the bold visionary who does the Superman punk rock version of this, where it's like, I see what this is now, but I want to talk about what it could be in a positive way. It casts a vision forward rather than the easy thing now. Like Inertia now is doing the like doom and gloom plot.
Well, and I think you'll in a mini preview for our intro into Mindset next week is that book is very much, I think, more of a specific reaction to 2020 because of when that book came out. While Thumbs, as you mentioned, feels like a reaction to that, it fits very well when you view that through the lens of a reaction to 2020, but it came out before that. So we're still in the tail, TAIL, the tail of the wake of society coming out of 2020. And that's the world that mindset comes into, just a few years old now. I don't think, I agree with you. I want to see that take two. I don't know if we're there yet. And if we are there, that's a book that's being written and conceived of maybe now to come out in a year or year and a half from now. Like that book isn't out yet because I don't know if we're in the right headspace to think that this is a book that can exist. But maybe we're starting to get there. Maybe the world we're in now, it feels like
I don't think we deserve that book yet because the truth is the wrong people would embrace it.
And I would not be shocked if there are creators who have like, yeah, I have this idea, but like I know it's not going to work now.
Well, they're like, I don't want my book to get retweeted by Elon to be like, see, like social media can be good. This book gets it. It's like, they're not talking about you.
Yeah.
They're talking about what comes after you.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure in that book, there's a character that is Elon who is the villain. He just doesn't realize, like in that hypothetical book, I'm absolutely certain there is someone who was, there's a one-to-one analog for him and he's a character in it and he's the worst person in the world, but he's like, see, it's good. It's like, no, you're the bad guy. Because obviously he's not going to read a book like that. But yeah, I agree. I don't think we're ready for that. But I'm with you again. I would love to see it, and I would hope that we're not too far away from getting to that point yet. Because while it feels like we haven't reached the nadir yet, because every day seems to get worse and worse, at some point we're going to bottom out, right? Like just logic says at some point we're going to bottom out, and at that point it can only start going back up, however slowly it may be. And maybe we're not at the bottom yet, but at that point when wherever we actually hit rock bottom, true rock bottom, that's when I think a book that is more hopeful about what comes next can actually be embraced. Because I don't doubt that there are creatives who have that kind of story, or have that idea for a story, but just know the time isn't right. Just know that it doesn't feel like the time to tell that. And I would hope that they're sitting on it and waiting for the time when they know that book can hit better.
Good luck timing the market on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Part of me has to believe that time's going to exist. We're going to get there. We're going to make it that far. And maybe I'm just convincing myself that we're going to make it that far, but
some group of people will make it that far. It might not be us.
But I don't think as a society we're there yet. So yeah, we're still seeing the ripple effects of, and maybe you're right. Maybe it is the easy way out right now. Maybe it's not the lazy way, but it's the most expedient way to tell a story, right? Oh, you're telling a story about technology? Well, it's bad, right? AI in it, that's got to be bad. Always has to be bad. Social media, bad influence. All this stuff has to be bad because that's the way we see the world. And all it takes is just what your spin on it. How is it bad? How is it affecting a society? And how is that a reflection on our world? Whether it's set present day or in the future or anything like that, that is the world that we live in. And because it is relatable, those stories resonate because we're in it right now. We're experiencing that, we're seeing it reflected. It's the idea that, in general, all great science fiction is a reflection of our world, right? That the reason that you can use it for allegory and things of that nature is because it's a way to tell a story about contemporary society without using contemporary setting and things like that. And I think a book, whether it's the prose novel or a comic, anything about that's dealing with our world today, right now, I think there is an appetite. It's almost like it's a reassuring thing that, like, yes, it's bad. And we can read stories that say that it's not just us thinking it's bad. It's being reflected that this actually is the worst timeline. It's almost like that's reassuring in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That it's not just in your head. It doesn't just feel like it's bad. No, it's actually bad because here is the art being produced about it. And it's a way of explaining and showing the world outside of your newscast or your feed, your social media feed, that's bad. You're getting it from different ways, and it's reassuring that everyone understands we're in a bad place.
Yeah. By the way, the other thing that occurred to me while I was reading this book, because of the mom character, is that I think comics are a rare medium that for the foreseeable future will be immune to AI interpretation. Like
God, I hope so.
you can ask, well, but you can ask an AI modeler to like, you can give it a 500-page PDF of, Moby Dick or something and say, read this and tell me what it's about. I don't think you could give it like a CBR file or a PDF of a comic book and have it comprehend paneling, images, sequence, like character POVs. Like it could read the captions, and if it had a comic script, it would be able to do something. But I don't think it would know what to do with it. It could search the internet and tell you what other people said about it and compile user reviews, but I don't think it would be able to process this. So I'm like, I think this is like a way of hiding our ideas from AI, is to put them in comic books.
I sincerely hope you're right about that. I sincerely hope that you're right about that. I'm going to choose to believe you're right about that. That it can interpret pictures in that way. That it can. The idea, what you're saying is that like maybe AI can look at a still image and interpret the picture, but comics aren't that. Sequential art is different,
especially sequential art that. Especially people who work with Sean Lowe's, like Hayden Sherman's art. What they're doing is not like a realism. There's very interesting choices of, paneling and breakdown. Can you imagine? There is no training that would help an AI modeler understand the seeds. Going back to that one, what AHA did for that was so one of a kind, so like revolutionary in terms of framing, paneling. It's like watching an indie French film, or something like that. And yeah, I'm like, AI can only liken it to other things, which also, to some extent is true of humans. Like when I read Thumbs, I'm like, this is as hard as reading The Seeds. I am doing comparisons like that, but that it helps me interpret it, whereas I don't know if an AI model can work the same way yet. So we'll see. 3 years from now, this episode may age very poorly, or at least that clip of it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, who knows? It's possible.
I'm really tempted. Quick, if I really played with AI, I would be tempted to upload like a 10-page short from like, I don't know, like a Vertigo Quarterly or something, and say like, tell me what this story is about. I'm not going to tell you the title. I'm not going to tell you the artist. You can't Google it. You just have to read these 10 pages of comics and tell me if you can figure it out.
At this point, I think it would just read the text, if possible. So
yeah,
again, I hope you're right about that. I really do. It would be nice if that experience, that understanding of how to read and experience sequential art in that way, and knowing that there's something in the mind, the human mind next to these still images that creates movement, that creates atmosphere and feeling like that. All the things that you get from comics that you don't get from any other storytelling medium, the thing that makes this unique, it would be nice if that stayed unique. I would like that very much.
Yeah. Or, if people would just realize like we don't actually want what you're selling in terms of AI, but we've already gone down that discussion.
Yeah, we have.
So anything else on this book? What did you think? This is your first time. It's your first time discussing it, which I guess could be true for both of us. But it's a newer, fresher book to you.
It is. And as I mentioned, with Hacktivists and Unfollow, it's easier for me to put myself back in the time when it came out because I read them as they came out or close to when they came out. So I'm less remembering the time and remembering the first time I read it, which automatically puts me in that time frame. This one's a little harder. And I think what you said earlier about this feeling, not that it feels reactionary, but that it fits when viewed through the lens of a reaction to 2020. Looking through it through those lenses, even though the book came out initially before then, it is a very convenient way to look at it. I couldn't help but think of it that way. I couldn't help but think of it as a reaction to 2020 versus a book that came out before it, meaning that it is in reality more predictive than it is reactive in that way. And seeing the book through and forcing myself to think of the book in that way, I think elevated a little bit for me that they were writing this story as they were seeing our relationship to social media decline. And then they jumped ahead to the end of what they thought that might be. And by the time they got to the end, society actually met them there.
Yeah.
Like they were predicting an end and society got there almost at the same time that they did, in terms of this is where we think this path is leading to. And it might take a while to get there, but this is where we think the inevitable end is. And society was like, no, we're going to get there in a year,
Right.
We're going to meet you at the bottom, right as your book comes out.
We'll race you to the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Races on with the printing press.
So that I think elevates it a little bit for me in terms of content. I do want to say, we touched on a little bit earlier, but I love the choice of the limited color palette that Sherman went with here. You're right. It kind of like out in the woods, it's more gray tone. In the city, it has this kind of greenish, feels very matrixy, right? Anytime you have like the green filter or what, but very, very, very limited tone, and then that reddish pinkish hit for any sort of tech, and then the one little bit where Tabitha goes into the simulation when she's talking to the AI model, as it were, of the powers of their recreated kids, and it's all bright red, and she's the only thing that's kind of in the grayscale as a flip of the rest of the book. It's very jarring and it stands out, but that idea of just highlighting certain colors, I think it's incredibly effective here. So you just get a sense of almost like a sense of what doesn't belong in the world in a way,
right.
the way they've set it up. But the fact that the mom, well, eventually we only see one mom character, but early on, all the moms, kind of floating head above, but this like solid red body that stands out against this kind of bleak monochrome background. All that's real stark, and the visual I think is really, really cool, and I really love seeing that. I thought that was a cool way of just a little extra layer of storytelling.
Yeah, totally agree. The colors are actually one of my like distinct memories of the book. The single issue covers are like pixelated pinky, like pink covers that have usually some kind of silhouette or outline. Don't remember them all distinctly.
Well, and I'm sure that's meant to be a thumbprint.
Fingerprint, yeah.
Fingerprint, yeah.
Yes, a thumbprint, yes.
I assume they were all thumbprint and not like, there are 5 issues that they theoretically could have been, all 5 digits. I didn't compare that closely.
But I think there's a different character silhouetted on each one. Or
I think so.
The same character at a different age.
Yeah.
But they're mostly kids, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, part 2 has like a whole hand. I don't know. Like I don't really understand what they're doing, other than like it grabbed me off the comic rack.
Sure.
It was like bright pink cover. I didn't know who Sean Lewis was, didn't know who Hayden Sherman was, but I was like, limited 5-issue series. I like Image. I like the art. I'm going to check it out. And I had grabbed the first one, then I fell behind. And luckily, I just happened to be doing like a random stop at a comic shop. Comic shop owners are just amazing, because I've got 3 or 4 that I go to like check in, a couple times a year. And one of them, I went in, he remembered that I bought the first one 3 months ago. And he's like, hey, I know you didn't pull it, but 2 and 3 are here if you want them. And I was like, yeah, why not? And then I was like, when people work that hard and are so good at what they do, I have to go back for 4 and 5.
Well, yeah, if they're going to go out of their way to remember, yeah, that's
And it was like a genuinely they weren't like set aside for me or anything. He had just locked in like, oh, he's the one who picked up some, because I bet he ordered 2 or 3 copies total.
Yeah, yeah,
of
yeah,
this
yeah.
book, and was like trying to figure out like who's this going to appeal to? Because I could see this. Like, I think there's an argument that this is like a teen dystopia book, but I think this is one of those rare cases where the subject is teen dystopia, but that is not the audience.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Who are they trying to target with this? Because you're
I don't
right.
know that many teens that would hang with this.
Yeah, but at the same time, you could see them being like, this, you give this to them as a cautionary tale. Like here's a potential, like here's a fable about the future, about what it could be of the path that you might be on right now. Not saying that was their intent, but you could see someone doing that, right? You could having
Sure,
read the
yeah.
story and be like, you give it to someone
A
who
dad
is
who's
the
trying to ruin comics for their kid.
maybe so, yeah, yeah. But you could see someone giving the book to a kid who was, the age of Charlie and Nia, before Charlie gets injured and goes into his coma, right? You could see, at that point, I think they're probably supposed to be like high school age, right? Like teenagers.
Right.
So you could see them, you could see someone giving the book to them saying like, hey, read this. It's the idea, like, yeah, it's an allegory. It's an exploration about technology and our relationship to it in our world. Whether that's the intent of the creators, I have no idea, and whether or not it would even be effective for someone that age, I don't know. Maybe more so if it's collected, it would definitely be hard in a single issue. Be like, hey, read this and wait a month for another one. Like that's a tough ask. But maybe in a collected trade, and be like, just hang with it, read the whole thing, and tell me what you think at the end.
Give it to somebody on a road trip, right? Where
Yeah,
it's like
where
there's no cell coverage. You're in
they're
the
going to
back
read the
seat.
whole thing
Yeah.
before like, and it's harder to bail in the middle if you have the whole thing there and you say, well, I'm halfway through, I'll let's just see how it goes, versus in single issue where, yeah, this is a harder book. This is on the harder end of, I think, a book to stick with if it doesn't grab you, or if you don't think that it could be going somewhere that you might find interesting. Because but I think it's intentionally so that way. It's intentionally, I don't know if confusing is the right word, but it's intentionally
challenging.
like
It makes you
obtuse.
reach for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think because there is something about the message of the book and the style of the book reinforcing each other, which is like this is a book because it's hard to read, to understand, to get the world. You can't be reactive and reflexive with it. You have to chew on it. It's the same thing about David Foster Wallace's book Infinite Jest. This monster book that 1,800 pages with 500 of those pages being end notes, not footnotes, but you have to flip back and forth. And he was like, "Yeah, well, the book is about a dystopian future where people are too easily entertained and distracted by everything." And if I made a book about that thing that was really digestible and easy, I would be contributing to the problem. So I made a book where you really have to want it. Like you have to enjoy the act of reading, sitting in a quiet room by yourself for hours and hours in order to connect with this. And in that way also understand the critique of these characters who are trapped in like really shallow, reflexive patterns of thought, and watching them is infuriating when you're sitting in a room for 100 hours reading a book. So, it was a little pretentious when David Foster Wallace kind of said that about his own book, but he wasn't wrong.
Well, the idea that it's like the medium is also the message as well, right?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
right. Because like that's always like the thing about Jurassic Park sequels. I didn't see the 2025 one. And I'm not protesting it. Like I would see it if I got a bucket of popcorn and 2 hours to kill. But when
longer than
when
2
like
hours, but
when
yeah.
the Jurassic World, whatever the Chris Pratt one was,
Yeah, Jurassic
like
World.
people were like, okay, that was fun, but this is actually a failed critique because the whole critique they were launching, the philosophical justification for the movie was like, of course we made the park again. This is human nature. People want bigger and better and like, more teeth and this and this. And it like the movie was trying to point at society like, you made us make this park, But really what they're saying is you made us make this movie.
Yeah.
Because the movie itself is also offering its viewers more teeth, bigger dinosaurs. It's like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, that's nothing. Look at the new thing that's even bigger and even scarier. And so like that's the classic example of the failed critique of like they're using they are dependent on people like falling for the thing the movie's critiquing in order to get the critique to them.
Yeah.
So there's just like you're kind of sawing off the branch you're sitting on if your message actually worked. Like what is someone's best case scenario? Like they're sitting there watching Jurassic World and they're like, really right. I should never watch this movie again. I should go ask for my money back.
If they were, if they got
is that what they wanted?
They should have walked out halfway through, right?
Exactly. Yeah. As soon as they had the talk from the doctor that was in the original movie.
Yeah.
So anyway, So I like Thumbs a lot. I don't think it's as good as it could have been as a book. I think there were just like a few little excursions into like side quests where it's like, I think this could have been a really tight 4 issues or a much more expansive 12 issues. I don't need the 12 issues because like we were saying, it's like, how many times have we seen dystopian worlds? Like we don't need every detail of them unless they're truly original and deeply impact the character. Because our characters are, I mean, imagine being paused for 5 years at peak adolescence and waking up in an older body, but you're still like, we're in the middle of a war, right? It's like, no. That's all been settled. Your sister who was your closest ally.
Yeah.
We lost. Yeah.
We lost. Yeah.
Finally, those capitalist pigs will pay for their crimes. And Austin, we won.
And I think
the classic Austin Powers line.
That is part of the idea is that like Charlie is quote unquote new to the world, right? He doesn't know what's going on. And so the reader is put in that as well. So yeah, if you spend all this time with the backstory and you give, I think they want to give the readers essentially the same experience that Charlie has waking up into the world, that he's lost and all he has is what he remembers, which was 5 years earlier. And then he's got to fill in all these gaps as he's going along. He's got to learn the world as he's going along. So yeah, I agree. There's probably a little bit that could be cut out. There are some ancillary characters that do get names that I didn't even bother writing down because like Tabitha has the one boy that she kind of likes, who's also, you know,
and like the whole first kiss
with
thing.
Him.
I kind of like that was one where it felt
I needed more of that or less of it.
Yes.
I needed more of that or none of it. I think that is
exactly
that's the one thing for me was that guy needed to play a much bigger role because in the end, like he's fighting Thumbs and then like the building collapses and then like, okay, truce, we got to go save Tabitha. It's like, well, would that guy have done that? Like, I don't know. Like, would he all of a sudden just like drop all of his allegiance and to be like, we got to help. I got to team with the enemy because he happens to be her brother. But like, I think this guy's a heretic, but now I'm going to help him. Like that happens really quickly. So that I think for me is the one thing that like that needed to be a lot more or just excise it out of the story. It doesn't need, but that's a minor thing there because I understand what they were trying to show there. That I think what they were trying to show was the need for like real human connection outside of
and how they were deprived of that because even when they were in the woods with each other, they had goggles on with the AI over it, right? No one was interacting directly with anyone's face anymore. And I think that was what the whole significance of like the human touch in the first kiss. And there was the weird sex talk in the very like opening pages of the book. From a mom, which I like in hindsight, I'm like, why did you start there?
I don't know, but I agree. I think there's maybe it's a little bit they could have gotten they could have not ditched, but trim a little here and there. But I don't think it affects the overall story, the message of the book. It is that it's going off there. But yeah, I think it's an interesting look, especially kind of in conjunction with the books you've already talked about. That has a real focus on. I think something we mentioned for both Hacktivists and Unfollow is the idea that both those books reference real actual events in social media's history, and they point to those events as being like these were important,
the catalytic moments.
They're saying these were important, and how they viewed them were very different, but they both went out of the way to see like this stuff mattered. There was a point when this was it. This is why we have all of it. This book doesn't go out of its way to be like, social media was great, we got to save it, or social media was terrible, we got to burn it all down. This book has very much been like, if you're on either one of those sides, you're probably not on the right side. This book feels like it's going out of its way to say like, this is an end result of, if we let tech run amok, if it goes unchecked, this is where it can end up. We can end up with these two factions of extremism. And in this case, it's that extremism is like living in a virtual world or complete rejection of technology. You know, those are our stand-ins for opposite sides of the aisle here. And I don't think the book is saying either one of them is good. I think they're both saying both those are flawed, and that it relies on just people and the connections that people make. And I think that is in view of our kind of series we're putting together here, that I think is refreshing. That I think is an interesting idea that this book puts forth, that it's not coming down on a side of yay technology, boo technology, or anything like that. And that it's simply using it as a springboard to say like, this is the path that we're on. And it feels inevitable. And as you said, it became more inevitable as soon as the book came out in trade. We got there so much quicker, and they were proved to be prescient and to be right about that. And a handful of years on afterwards, it's even more true. You know, we're even closer to that now than we were right after the book came out. So that is scary.
Yeah. Summer of social media, man, just keeps getting darker. Like, we knew it was going to be dark.
Yeah.
But the real world has really not helped.
Yeah. It seemed like the right time to address something like this because of what was going on, how society is. And in a lot of ways, I think we were right about that.
Yeah, it's just we lost our escapism in the comic books, right?
Yeah, it's only getting darker. It's
like what this show has been for me for a lot of things. It's like sometimes we just do like we literally do a joyride, and it's like when I'm reading Joyride, I'm not thinking about what's happening in society in 2025.
Although that book also did have fascists running the world too, so like even
there's always going to be that.
Yeah,
there's apparently no escaping that, and enough people want it.
Clearly, yeah. But
anyway,
you know, this is a good. I like for this kind of era. In terms of our timeline frame, this post 2016, pre 2020 kind of time capsule of where we were with social media, I think this book is a good look at that mindset of already having some of the rot of social media infect us, and projecting where it could go, and then being like, oh yeah, nope, they got a lot of that stuff right. They nailed a lot of where the world got to, as we look back on it now, 5-6 years on from when the book came out.
Yeah. All right. Well, unless you have anything else to add, we'll be back next week with our intro to Mindset, and then the following week with Mindset, which again is going to be all new territory for me. It sounds like it's not going to be just an out of nowhere positive upswing, but I found it hard to imagine being darker than this, but I could imagine it being just a different kind of.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But that book we're inching closer to the little more current day relationship to technology and to social media and all of it together. So it'll be the most contemporary book that we talk about in our little mini series.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will. As always, we're in all the places. StoriedArcs.com. Blue Sky primarily, then Instagram, then technically Facebook, and we are totally done over at X. But StoriedArcs.com is where you can find all the things for us, and we will see you next week for Intro to Mindset.
Peace.